Now I can just hear ringing in my ears, at this very moment, a chorus of anthropologists protesting that a person in the modern age cannot legitimately assume that the symbols of one culture in a certain time and place has the same meaning for another society of a different time and place. But to those skeptics, I will just begin by saying that the whole notion of Mesoamerican cultural traits is based precisely on such a premise. But to be sure, regional variations and stylized innovations on symbolic archetypes does indicate that deviations in perceptions of a symbol from one society to the next can be expected. If iconographic variations of a certain type are the norm, but vary from region to region, then why couldn't the meaning of a symbol also vary from time to time and from place to place? Fair enough. There is, however, a legitimate manner in which to test whether or not iconographic practices among the Maya, the Toltec, the Aztecs, and other Mesoamerican groups are homologous or analogous, that some might share a common origin and therefore be homologous, while others might have arisen coincidentally, independently, which we would refer to as being analogous. Let us examine then, with increased scrutiny then, the proposed symbolic homologies that I recognize between Aztec and Maya forms of iconographic expression by examining a variety of well-known historical sites and iconographic records of independent origin that are known to have been influenced by the shared efforts of cosmopolitan Mesoamerican communities. Which is to say, there are sites that have both strong Aztec or Toltec and Maya influences. It is well known and documented, for example, that Teotihuacan, north of Mexico City, was home to priest guilds from various religious societies of tropical and temperate Mexico, including those of the Toltecs, Maya, Mixtecs, and Zapotecs, which apparently lived convivially with each other during the Classic period. Artistic styles of all of these cultures have been uncovered among the ruins of Teotihuacan. And the same can be said for widely appreciated sites and well-studied sites at Cacaxtla in the state of Puebla, Xochicalco in the state of Morelos, Chichen Itza and Uxmal in the state of Yucatan, and Tulum in Quintana Roo. Let's just see then if the essentially hybrid forms of iconographic expression reveal the equivalence of regional perspectives on the feathered serpent. We can begin the discussion by considering imagery employed on the foundation of a Mesoamerican ball court located at the so-called Maya Toltec site of Chichen Itza in northern Yucatan. This locality is about as far from the source of Toltec influences as can be found in Mesoamerica. Yet it is widely recognized that Toltec influences, that is Central Mexican influences, predominate the Chichen Itza iconography imagery, including themes that relate directly to the feathered serpent. To begin with, feathered serpents in Maya lands are never depicted as rattlesnakes, since this creature generally shuns wet tropical habitats, those that are typical of the Maya. On the other hand, most feathered serpents in central Mexico do possess rattles, as would be the case of the water lily serpent at Chichen Itza. In this case, the rattle supports a large and feathered water lily. This serpent's head is also clearly from central Mexico, insofar it has a forked tongue, a nuance that is almost unknown in Maya territories. Yet this Toltec serpent is associated with a Maya-inspired skull figure with water lilies ushering from his eye sockets. And this skull lacks a Toltec goggle across the forehead. A Toltec warrior spirit that overlooks the scene emerges from a large and ray-studded solar motif. this being, again, a distinctly Toltec design. Hence, the Maya and Toltecs that constructed this religious site were clearly aware of the homologous features of upland and lowland Mesoamerican feathered serpents, including their respective and close association with water lilies. This same ball court foundation is surrounded by water lily stalks that meander in a snake-like fashion between several Aztec warriors. This general theme mirroring the aforementioned water lily gods at Copan that dangle in a similar fashion from coiling water lily serpents. But here the water lily does not surge from the cranium of a Maya water lily skull. Rather, several stalks issue from a beaked skull, which would be one of several variant portrayals of Quetzalcoatl in central Mexico, indicating again that Toltec sculptors in Maya domains were aware of the equivalency between the Maya kukul-kan and the Toltec quetzalcoatl. Closer to the Valley of Mexico, we can turn to the famous cross-cultural Maya-Toltec hybrid site at Cacaxtla in the Valley of Puebla, just on the other side of the volcanoes Ixtaccíhuatl and Popocatépetl. Here we encounter hybrid deities and feathered serpents that betray the mark of both upland and tropical lowland Mesoamerican societies. Murals at Cacaxtla envisage the feathered serpent as a blue-feathered dragon, not so unlike the specimen of the feathered serpent on Teotihuacan's famous Temple of Quetzalcoatl. But then, this serpent produces a large and white lowland Maya water lily flower on its tail, albeit with long and blue streaming quetzal feathers that match with the serpent's extended body. We know these feathers are identifiable as the precious quetzal bird because this specific bird is observed right there on the scene, calling out to the serpent. With a squared snout and a spiraled earpiece, this creature bears all the marks of a Toltec quetzalcoatl. Yet the associated deity wears Maya apparel and holds a large tube that is generally familiar to Maya iconographers. The implement normally including a water lily serpent that passes through the tube. This feathered serpent extends his body across a body of water, from which one can make out a white water lily to the side of the quetzal bird. Thus the Maya and Toltecs at Cacaxtla were in total agreement as to what their respective visions of the feathered serpent stood for. On an adjacent wall at Cacaxtla, we encounter a deity that represents the Maya water lily jaguar, with a headdress that represents a Maya water lily skull with a water lily ear flare. A blue water lily serpent, but now with feathers, has a white flower attached to its body in the form of a trefoil. And this feature mirrors the color pattern of the vegetative motif that extends from the deity's waistline, a stylized serpentine lotus shoot whose branched tips terminate in white water lilies that match precisely with the massive feathered flower at the end of the aforementioned feathered serpent. Hence, a random intermingling of distinctive Maya and Toltec motifs define the hybrid water lily serpents at Cacaxtla. A more famous feathered serpent that graces the walls of the principal structure at Xochicalco, a ruin whose name translates as House of Flowers, is also thought to be inspired by multicultural influences. Not unlike Teotihuacan, this arid upland site that lies due south of the Valley of Mexico in the state of Morelos is thought to have served as a cosmopolitan meeting place for clergy from distant parts of Mesoamerica. Although several priests that are figured on the structure wear royal garb that seems more fitting in Maya territories, the dominant figure on the structure is a feathered serpent. And he exhibits an aspect that is more in keeping with Mexican highland tradition. It has never been noted, however, that the feathered clusters on this serpent, like those at Teotihuacan and among the Maya, are fashioned as trefoil motifs, one appendage of which is extended and crooked, thus forming an asymmetrical structure that hints of water lily symbolism. Since the trefoil is symbolic of a water lily throughout Mesoamerica, and each of these trefoils alternates with a water sign, this being a trilobed motif with a curlicue at its base, the serpent's body reads as water flower, water flower, water flower. The same water sign is associated with a floral design that floats on a body of water on a well-known and so-called sunstone from Tenochtitlan, the capital of the Aztec Empire. This stone clearly portrays a polypetalous water lily flower floating on water. The paired fork motifs probably denoting the aroma from the flower. The water signs that emerge from the center of the polypetalous flower can be interpreted as an outpouring of water lily nectar, while those on the four corners of the stele probably suggest a watery medium. This late use of these flower and water motifs support the identification of Xochicalco's feathered serpent as a proverbial water lily serpent. A similar configuration of repeating paired glyphs that denote water lilies is observed as well at Palenque, where a Maya prince dances across a water lily grove that has issued from the skull of the underwater water lily deity. The whole image is framed by repeating quadripartite floral motifs with a crossbar and a standard Maya water lily sign, a large circle flanked by two circlets. These paired insignias read as, literally, Nikte ha. Nikte meaning flower, ha meaning water. This word Nikte ha means either water flower or specifically water lily. So the whole scene is surrounded by Nikte ha, which would be water lily, water lily, water lily, water lily. Obviously, this symbol is very important. A quite distinctive hybrid feathered serpent form at Tulum dates to late stages of the post-classic period, not long before the Spanish conquest, and deep in the heart of Maya territory on the east shores of the Yucatan Peninsula. Yet the feathered serpent at Tulum exhibits both Maya and Aztec attributes. On one end of the serpent, we observe an Aztec-styled eagle motif with outstretched wings, while the other end of the serpent terminates in a dragon's head bearing a water sign and Maya-inspired water lily bud motif as an earpiece. His avian ophidian tails terminate in the same nippled Maya water lily bud motif, while a reptilian eye that suggests Aztec influences peers out of a large polypetalous flower that is observed in the middle of the serpent's coils. Next to the flower, we observe water lily berries, the terminal ovarian disc exhibiting a water lily's diagnostic tooth-like projections. While many art historians have identified these fruits as squash, the details and size of the berries suggest my botanical interpretation. And so it seems that distant cultures of Mesoamerica that shared their lives at famous temples during early stages of the classic period, during the turn of the 1st century, were still sharing artistic themes during the age of the conquest of Mexico at Tulum. Kukul-kan of the Maya and quetzalcoatl of the Aztecs were deemed to be one and the same creature, and the serpent's close relationship with the sacred lotus has endured for millennia.